approximately, about 16 years ago. He was the head pujari here. It was a variety of services in the temple here, but the last service that he did here in New Dwarka was the head pujari for the deities of New Dwarka Dham. And he's much renowned for that activity, especially because he was very dedicated to that service. I think it's nice to know that whenever a devotee is very dedicated to a particular service, they do become famous, just like we read this morning, that a devotee becomes famous in their relationship and association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he was very much associated with Rukmini and Dwarkadish for many years, and very much appreciated his service. When he passed away in Vrindavan in 2000, they did have some gathering, Smrit Samra, and there all the devotees came together and they spoke some things about Ramdas Prabhu. We have some of these things written here, so I'd like to just kind of skip through it and kind of give some synopsis of Ramdas Prabhu, and then if someone would like to say a few words, be appreciated. So, in Vrindavan, when Ramdas Prabhu passed away, the devotees came together, they gathered together and they spoke at the ceremony, and so this is a summary of those things that they spoke. It is significant that Ramdas Prabhu left this world during the auspicious days when the moon is waxing between Ekadasi and Purnima in the very auspicious month of December. Prabhupada said that Vrindavan is a place for taking birth and a place for dying. To show us by his example, Srila Prabhupada left this world from Vrindavan. And when Ramdas came to know that his time was up, when the doctors told him he did not have much longer to live, he set his heart on leaving this world from Vrindavan Dham. It says, then there is a saying that there are three types of Rajabasis. One who is born in Vrindavan, one who lives in Vrindavan, and one who dies in Vrindavan. The one who dies in Vrindavan is the real Rajabasi. So we recognize Ramdas's most auspicious life and the ending of his life in Vrindavan. Amazing, amazing feat. So to understand Ramdas, we could kind of get an understanding of his conviction. He lived a very nice Krishna conscious life. I mean, to make that kind of conviction to die in Vrindavan. Ramdas was a very steady and determined devotee, a servant of Shri Shri Rukmini, Dwarkadish, Gaurnitai, and Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra. He was a devotee, servant of the servants of the deities. He was very nice with the devotees. He treated everyone very nicely, encouraged them, gave them service to do, and took care of them in more ways than one. Not only like physically took care of them in their needs, but also if they needed anything mentally or emotionally. He took a lot of effort. He made a lot of effort to satisfy the devotees that were working in that department. He was the kind of individual who didn't get too disturbed if someone couldn't show for their service. He took it kind of like that's what it is, and so he did whatever he could to fill the spot if someone couldn't come or someone didn't show up. He tended to be quite benevolent in that way, a very good quality of a devotee, very tolerant, and never really took out anger at the devotees for not coming to and doing the service. And that's a pretty big thing, because we all know that if you've got a management position and someone doesn't show up, it's very difficult not to get a little bit disturbed or hysterical. One or the other. Or even threats. So for him to have that kind of a nature, stature, was quite amazing. And he did show that. He exhibited that. Of course, everybody has their time, so I'm sure he had his times where that he couldn't tolerate it. It's not that anyone's that strong, but the point being is that in the overall situation, Ramdas exhibited more tolerance than maybe a normal person would in these kind of circumstances. And that was very much appreciated by the local devotees, especially those that worked very closely with him. He was also very fixed on keeping a high standard and very clean standard in the Pujari program. He also was a cook, and so he had a really good understanding of that service attitude, that service standard to Sri Sri Rukmini Dwarkadish. I recall many years back he was very adamant about getting as pure a product as possible to offer to the deities. It was very, the sugar thing and whatever else it was, whatever else that was there. He was very concerned about that, and he would be very adamant not to offer anything to the deities that wasn't actually the best quality, as good as possible that he could acquire. And it was really good because he got a lot of devotees to follow him, and they gave him a lot of donations and support in that. And that was kind of like, I'm not saying it was revolutionary, but it wasn't an ordinary temple situation. Most temples didn't really concern themselves with these kind of things in those days. And he kind of like brought on a different kind of mood in terms of serving the deities directly. So, a little bit of background on Ramdas Prabhu. He was born in East Coast, Philadelphia. He spent more time in New York City than there. And one day he made a concerted effort. He hitchhiked across the country with just a few bucks in his pocket. He was a Rosicrucian, so he wanted to kind of join a farm in California. So he did arrive in California in 1980, and he spent a night in the shelter in downtown Los Angeles. The next day, where he stayed at the shelter downtown, the devotees came in that area and they were chanting Harinam. And so he watched the devotees, became attracted by that. And in the course of standing there and watching, a devotee gave Ramdas an invitation card to come to the LA temple for the Sunday feast. And they also gave him a Back to Godhead magazine. So he read that magazine. And the next day, he decided that he'd make a trek to the temple right here in New Dwarka. And the downside of it was that he had no money. So he was actually totally broke. So what he did is he just walked. He walked all the way from downtown Los Angeles to here. I'm not sure how far. That's quite a few miles, right? Maybe 10 miles. I don't know, something like that. So he walked all the way from downtown to New Dwarka here, and he met the vice president of the temple, who I don't know who was at that time, but who was it? Vatsala. So at that time, Vatsala Prabhu was the vice president. And they had a little conversation, and he invited Ramdas to spend the night. And from there, I think Ramdas broke down and started crying. He was very emotional about that. So yes, he stayed, and he immediately got involved in service, and I believe that he was into communications and public relations. That's the first thing they put him in, although he was never really trained formally in any of that. They just kind of threw him in that department. And I believe that he was working with, at that time, Amala Bhakta Prabhu. Yes. I think he was he the Bhakta leader also at that time? Was Donavue? Maharaj? Yeah, he did. He tried to go and help with the organization of the permits, different permits around the city for the devotees to distribute books and various functions. And they also got him on the altar to do some deity worship in the evening. And I believe the story goes that one day, Vatsala came up to him and asked him, if he would like to be in the Pujari department, if he liked doing Pujari work, something like that. And Ramdas said, yeah, I do. And so it says here that no more than about 10 minutes later, Vatsala Prabhu came back to Ramdas and said, okay, you're the head Pujari. So I guess those things worked that way in those days. And he accepted the service, and so he had a good attitude, as we mentioned. I think one thing that kind of stood out with Ram Das Prabhu was that, we've said this many times, but he was a big-statured man. He was big. He was, for a Hare Krishna devotee, he was quite large. Not that he was fat, he was just built, strong, big guy. And his hands were huge. Whenever you shook his hand, you didn't see your hand anymore. He just engulfed it. And his heart was like that also. It was really big. And he would sometimes, if not regularly, he would cook the burfi. And because he was a man of large stature, everything he did was quite large. So sometimes he could give you a piece of burfi and it could weigh a pound. It was a big, huge piece of burfi. It took like 3 days to eat it. And that was like, one day thing for him. So it was just that kind of a person. Everything about him was just big heart, big hands, big body. So everything that he did was kind of like big. And it was kind of like nice. But at the same time, he had a very soft heart. He did. He actually, I recall I worked with him for several years there before, something like maybe 10 years or something like that before he left. And I do recall always having good interaction with him, and he'd always try to give me a piece of burfi. And I wouldn't take it all the time because I always knew that he had samosas in his bag too. So I said, well, I'll take a samosa today. So he had a tendency of carrying burfi and samosas. And I've always thought of myself as a samosa man. So big samosas, yeah. So it was a meal. So he did love Srila Prabhupada's books, very much so. He always carried books with him. He was very adamant about when he would go on the altar, he would chant the mantras for the puja, but he would also recite the translation at the same time. He just felt that that was what needed to be done. So he would not only chant the verse mantras, but he would also read the translation or recite the translation on the altar, which is kind of unique. And he was diagnosed with a heart condition, and so he had to kind of like quit his service. And he stayed here in New Dwarka for about 1.5 years, across the street here in 3765, and he kind of recuperated as best he could, but he was very weak. And they didn't think he was going to be able to live much longer. He went to the hospital here, USC hospital, and he was there for a while. They said that he only had maybe a month or 2 to live. But then 1.5 years later, here in New Dwarka, he was still existing, didn't die. So then I paid his way to India, him and his wife, and they got set up in Vrindavan. And we tried to support him a little bit while he was there in India, maintain his program with him and his wife. And Krishnamkar took very good care of him. I visited him on a couple of occasions, and Ram Das at that time was still capable of cooking, so he'd cook a nice little feast in Vrindavan. It was very sweet, and she took really nice good care of him. He made his life much more tolerable in those later part of his life there in Vrindavan. So they spent about 3 years there, and he mostly read and chanted, listened to lectures. Devotees would come and visit him often, and they would always have really good interaction with him. They'd read together, chant together. He'd preach a lot. Ram Das was a preacher. He really liked to preach to you about Krishna consciousness. And sometimes you're not really ready for it. Sometimes he'd catch you in the middle of the street, and you're just anxious to do something, but he would stop and start preaching to you, and you have to stop and listen. He's a big man, so you don't really want to, couldn't get around him. It was nice that way. So I think what I should do now is just read a nice little letter here that was given to us just as of yesterday, from Krishna Kumari, his wife. She just wrote it. Read it. And this was kind of appropriate. It was a small glimpse into Ramdas Prabhu by Krishna Kumari, his wife. So, this is what she wrote. While listening online to the Srimad Bhagavatam class broadcast from New Dwarka Dham today, which is a couple days ago, which I am grateful to hear daily, I was reminded of Ramdas Prabhu. His calendar disappearance day is December 8th. So I decided to write a little incident from his last day for the joy of the devotees in New Dwarka. My dandavats to everyone serving in New Dwarka. Just like Balagopal described in his class today, a pure devotee is always effulgent. This was certainly the hallmark of Ramdas, and he exhibited this right up to the last moments. A couple of weeks before Ramdas made his departure, Kavichandra Swami was visiting Vrindavan and heard that Ramdas was living his last days there and preparing to leave. Maharaj kindly came every evening to read to Ramdas and give him companionship. Although Ramdas was very weak, there was no way to tell when he would go. He was always his usual jolly, sparkling self. Amazingly, he never became dejected, though his body was rapidly deteriorating. Kavichandra Maharaj brought with him one young man from Nigeria. He wanted Ramdas to preach to this devotee. He felt that Ramdas could make a difference in this man's life. The young man was Balidas, a famous music performer in Nigeria, who had lost his guru and was thinking of searching around Radhakund for some Babaji to accept. Bali opened up to Ramdas and bonded with him right away, just like everyone else who ever met Ram. He came by daily to offer any kind of menial service, but Ramdas was staunchly attending to all of his personal needs himself. So they mostly read and chatted about spiritual life as well as the challenges Bali was facing. Ramdas was expert at counseling devotees and making them feel like they were appreciated and understood. One day, after many days of hearing all of Bali's arguments and encouraging Bali to stay in the shelter of Srila Prabhupada's mission and not take shelter anywhere else, Ramdas asked Bali for a humble request. "Whatever you say, Ramdas Prabhu, considered it done," Bali replied. Then Ramdas asked him to promise that he would never leave Srila Prabhupada and that he would serve his mission without any reservations. "How can I deny a dying man's request?" said Bali, smiling ear to ear, and he agreed. Kavichandra Swami and Bali stayed with Ramdas that night, December 8, 2000, until 9 p.m. They had a happy time recounting some of the most wonderful moments in the early days of the movement, and Ramdas enjoyed the blissful mood. About an hour afterwards, Ramdas departed with Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet upon his heart, Giriraj upon his head, and speaking the holy name of Krishna at his final breath. Bali Prabhu returned to his native Nigeria and took up his promise sincerely. The results of his renewed dedication are spectacular. He became an important figure in the revitalization of the movement in Nigeria and is now the sponsor and guide for dozens of Harinam parties in West Africa around the world. Your fallen and lowly servant, Krishna Kumari Devi Dasi. Ramdas Prabhu ki jai. So, anybody else like to say something? Yeah.
Ramdas and his wife used to come to me whenever I was in New Dwarka with their plans for health and welfare. So they were quite interested in trying, even when Ramdas Prabhu was in quite physical difficulty, still they never thought about the welfare of the other devotees, not only here in New Dwarka, but they always had big plans for saving all the devotees all around the world. So that was quite unique. And I think they were always trying to, whatever physical problems the devotees had, they try to help them out to the best they could, either by recommending some doctor or personally trying to attend to them. So they not only talked about devotee welfare, but they actually participated in it themselves.
He would always encourage devotees by giving them some kind of instruction, or he would give them some direction, and even supply medicine if they were having a problem. He would do all those kind of things for devotees regularly. I remember I was going through some situation, and he introduced to me a lot of Chinese medicines, and I kind of like did them for a while, and it actually really worked. So he had that kind of nature about him. Yeah, not to only give an idea, but helped you do it. He helped me do it. He purchased everything. Showed me how to do it. So he gave direction also.
My experience with Ram Das was that before he actually took the service of Pujari, he tried different services and he was very surrendered to whichever service they assigned him. And I remember this particular service that everybody tried, Sankirtan. So we were together doing Sankirtan in some place in Los Angeles, and he approached this particular person. He's a huge man, really huge, and this person was very short. So he had to bend down to talk to this person. He gave him a magazine, and then this person reciprocated by giving him a quarter. And then he was so happy, he says, and he looks at me and he says, now he made his way back to Godhead. And very sweet. And he will do anything. We used to have some paraphernalia, fundraising. We were doing a lot of fundraising, so he will go and sell candles door to door and many other services. But something very remarkable that I always remember about him is that he had the good quality of like a father, like a mother. You could see him as your older god brother. He was very trustful. You can always feel like you can cry on his shoulder. And in fact, every time that I wanted to go and see him, outside his door, he had like about 5 or 6 shoes. And I always saw he's always busy. Every time I will go, he always had people. And especially the Matajis, they felt like he had someone they can talk to, they can reveal their mind. And not only just from the healthy issues, but also the spiritual advice. And they have a brother, they have almost like a guru in a sense. But so this is very remarkable, and it makes you feel comfortable that you have someone that cares for you. So I remember that. And one time, because here in Los Angeles we tried to open up centers. We opened up a center in San Fernando Valley. Then we moved, later on we opened up another center in Fullerton, Chapman Avenue, and he came with us. So Ram Das played the role, like again I said, mother or father. He was cooking we were about 4 or 5 brahmacharis. So he will cook for us very lovingly. He will make sure that we are properly fed, that we got the right amount of food at the right time. And so that's the memories that I have about Ram Das, being very care and something that you can never forget. So as far as medicine goes, I used to go with him to Tijuana. He will always find alternatives. He didn't trust so much in the traditional medicines that we use. He always wanted to find the more unharmful medicines for your treatment. So Ram Das Prabhu ki jai.
Yeah, I have one nice memory of Ram Das. In 1988, I visited here in Dwarka. I was living, I think, in New Zealand or Australia at the time, but I visited here for 3 weeks. I was living outside the temple, but I was coming every day and I was taking prasadam. and going out on Sankirtan with the devotees. So just before I was getting ready to leave, I thought, well, I probably should give a donation, because I've been here 3 weeks, I've been taking prasadam and like that. So I knew Ram Dass was the head pujari, so I went and I gave him a $50 donation. I said, this is for the deities. And he said, oh, thank you very much. He said, thank you, that's very kind of you. I said, yeah, it's just, donation for the I've I explained to him reason. So I got to go now. And he said, no, wait. I said, no, but I got to go, It was like right before I was ready to leave. And he insisted that I stay, and he ran off. And he came back just a few minutes later with a pretty nice sized bag of Mahaprasadam, and with a big smile on his face. And he said, no, this is for you. I said, well, you don't have to do that. He said, no. So it was just a nice, I appreciated that. I wasn't expecting anything, but I could see that he was determined. He was determined to reciprocate, and he really did it in a nice way. And it was a very nice way to end the visit. Ram Dass Prabhu Ki Jai.
And true to form, even when he was in his last days, he still did not focus on himself. I remember in '98, I went to Vrindavan, and when somebody's getting ready to leave their body, it kind of puts you in a certain mood that, what am I going to say, how to approach it. But within a few minutes, and it's not just my experience, all the devotees who went to visit him practically went through the same thing. You would enter the room in this kind of mood that you're talking to somebody who's just about to die and what to say, and you'd be a little bit down yourself. And within a few minutes, he would pick you up by speaking Krishna Katha. So at this particular time, this particular visit, he offered and promised to make us lunch. And we were all shocked. It was myself and a couple of other devotees from San Diego. And from New York, sorry. At '98, I was here already. And we were shocked, but we accepted. So the next day we went back, and Ram Dass personally, in his ill health, made us all lunch. And it was wonderful. All local produce right there in Vrindavan, and cooked by obviously a Brijbasi person. Didn't matter, he was born in Philadelphia. His heart was Vrindavan. And so that was my last exchange with him. And it was just mind-blowing that we went there to practically say farewell, put in a good word for us when you get back to Goloka. But his mood was that, forget about me, I'm concerned about you. What's happening in New Dwarka? What's going with this person, that person? Let me make you lunch. That was his mood. He was not focused on himself, which most of us tend to do when we're ill. We're just focused on our illness and we want to get over it. He was not into that. Ram Dass Prabhu Ki Jai.
I have great memories of Ram Dass Prabhu. In those days, I served cooking for the 4 o'clock offering. We had a big maha table of sweets every day, and it was very successful. So he was very proud of that maha table, and he knew it generated a lot of income to serve the deities in the deity department. I used to always come to his apartment with Krishna Kumari at his side, and sometimes he'd be so tired or not feeling well, and he'd be laying down on the floor on a little mat, and he'd just be serving and be half asleep and be involved in management position and services. He couldn't stop, even though he was not feeling well. He just kept going and going and going. And I do remember also there would be all those shoes in the hall, devotees waiting in line to either try to get medicine from him or need assistance for the Pujari department, or just to see him to get his association, because he was so overwhelmingly powerful with his spiritual presences and his inspiration. It was amazing. It was just so amazing. And one last thing, I used to be really, really kind of wondering why he was so big, and it just was reminded me of Lord Chaitanya a lot. So when I see him, I'd be thinking of Lord Chaitanya's mission and preaching, and it just gave me that connection to Lord Chaitanya, seeing Ram Dass.
Ram Dass Prabhu Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.